Welcome to Drop the Act, brought to you by Performing Perfectly. I'm your host, Chris Key, and today's episode is all about limitless potential. Imagine being a top cyclist for Great Britain and also rowing solo across the Atlantic. Well, Annasley Park has done just that. Don't miss it. Annasley, it is absolutely lovely to meet you. Thanks for joining us on the Drop the Act podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an exciting thing to be on, and it's actually one of my first podcasts. So,
well, listen, we're going to get to your story soon, and I'm amazed it's one of your first podcasts, and I'm got a sort of a hunch it won't be your last, but we'll get to that in a moment because you were on a keynote speaking course recently where you met my wife Lucy, and Performing Perfectly came and did a little bit of work with all of the delegates on that course, and Lucy came back and she said, "That's this amazing woman. You would not believe her stories." And as soon as I heard, I was like, "Right, can you send her an email? I'd love to get her on the podcast." So this turnaround has been really quick, but I'm thrilled that you're here. For those who don't know you, why don't we go right back to the beginning? I mean, you can go as far back as you like, but obviously from school, your first sort of foray into the professional world was actually in sport and was through road and track racing, bike, cycling. Do you want to just elaborate on how you got into that and a little bit about you? That would be great.
yeah. So I'm from Herefordshire. I come from a military family, and I've always been in a family that are just doers. We're not very academic, but yeah, we just sort of get on and do things. And so, yeah, I was brought up, in the mountains, walking all the time, in the outdoors, and just completely surrounded by nature. And so started running and was involved in ballet and dance and rugby and swimming and duathlon and, did loads and loads of sports, but then really started to focus on my running. And then at the age of around about 14, I got injured quite a lot, and I was training a lot with the guys, a lot of older guys. And so, yeah, just had to take a bit of time to um, let my body heal. But I couldn't really stop. I was quite a fidgety kind of person. So I had to have something else to motivate me. And I really struggled at school. Academics was something that I really struggled with. And so having a sport was my freedom, my sort of safe space, shall we say. And it was also my way of being able to formulate a language because, I have dyslexia, and it's something that we'll go into. But yeah, it was my way of escaping, shall we say, and being able to have those conversations with nature rather than humans. But yeah, I had to sort of stop cycling and stop running and start cycling as part of my rehabilitation, and just found that pure passion and freedom within that. And I could just ride in the mountains and escape and feel the elements and really sort of be in the sort of moment of introspection and self-reflection.
It's interesting. Sorry to interrupt. It's just interesting because you've just made me think about, we talk about communication on this podcast all the time, and you've just talked about the language that you needed to use, which was sport. And I think, there's a lot of questions that we could raise about the education system and how, it hasn't changed in hundreds and hundreds of years. We're still doing exactly the same thing that we've always done before. And certainly my background being in the arts and that creative side, and looking at how money gets slashed for that side. Sport as well is one of those subjects that sometimes isn't looked on in quite the same way as your academic subjects. But for you, it was so important to have that outlet to find your language and the way you could communicate and express yourself through sport.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100% agree. Like, I think the sort of performing arts is not pushed enough. I think we really stump our young generations now in that sort of creative processing and mind setting. I think one of the best things about, say, having dyslexia is that you really have to think differently. It's not about having a disability. It's actually a superpower, and I think neurodiversity, especially in education at the moment and young people, is becoming quite a hot topic. I think it's something that we should talk about more, and sort of, how we support not just the students but the staff, and also people in general with neurodivergency and also neurotypical mindsets. But yeah, I just had to think out of the box, and it's all about thinking about the bigger picture and visualization and being able to communicate that in a different way to other people and yourself.
So what was the cycling journey then? Once you were bitten by the bug of cycling, what was the trajectory then that took you to, to the top of your game in many ways?
Yeah, so within 2 years, I was selected for the GB Olympic team, and that's the academy team. So I rode for them for about 2 years in Manchester, traveled all over the world, doing world tours, and riding with some incredible people. But again, my injuries sort of led through from my running into my cycling, and there were politics involved in that too. And I moved to Belgium with the GB team, and really struggled just with injuries. So I let go. I was let go by the GB team, picked up a professional cycling contract with Trek Drop, and rode with them for about a year and a half. But then had a condition called EILO, which is exercise-induced laryngeal obstruction. And so you create too much lactate in the body, and you can push hard, but you just can't get the oxygen in. And I just couldn't fund that private operation, so that would cut my career. And I really struggled, because I think, if you an elite athlete and it's your way of experiencing life through sports and being able to have that sort of communication with yourself and others, and when you lose that sense of identity, and I lost that massively.
Well, before we come to that, let's just go back a little bit. So that journey to, in your pursuit of excellence within cycling, did you find that the mindset that you got from your family, the sort of, I don't know whether resilience is the right word, but if it's an army background, probably moving around quite a lot, being outdoors, having that natural enthusiasm for the outside world, did that help you? Or what age were you when you were sort of climbing that ladder, and how did mindset and focus play a part in the beginning of your career?
Yeah, I think I have incredibly strong parents, and I've got a twin sister and an older brother, all very, very passionate about what they do. And so I had to sort of also live to that standard of being, elite athlete or elite at whatever you pursue.
Did you rise? Did you mind that pressure? Sorry to interrupt, but did you rise to the occasion, or was it just expected and you just thought this is the way the world is and I have to compete?
I think that's kind of all I ever knew was I was the kind of child that wanted to always be like perfect. And I thought that was the thing to strive for, which was actually, I think, was my downfall, and sort of weakened me in a way. We talk about resiliency, and a lot of people have this connotation of, just getting on with it and having a stiff upper lip. But actually, there's so much more to that. And I think it kind of comes hand in hand with, having that vulnerability and having that curiosity and having that integrity, but also really understanding what resiliency means. And so, yeah, I had a really bad connotation of what resiliency meant. And it had a big part to play in my burnout throughout my cycling. But yeah, it really set the standard as to, when you are so passionate about something, to strive for it. But there's sort of like pros and cons to having that kind of mindset.
Elaborate on that a little bit. What are the pros and cons that you found then with that?
Yeah, I think when you are striving for a goal and you want it, you're always looking for the end goal. But that end goal, that reaching that pinnacle point, you're always on to the next one. Like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And you actually forget about the process, and you don't really give yourself enough time to look back and reflect. And I never did that. I was always pushing for the next thing. And I only recently realized that actually enjoying the process is so much more worthwhile than trying to look for the end goal. Because I had moments in my life where I've had huge burnout, and those were probably one of my regrets, is not having enough time or giving myself enough time to reflect on the achievements, and also the moments of real hardship as well, and really embracing those. I think, when you strive for something so high, you don't, well, for me, I didn't want to fail at anything, and I really feared failure. I didn't know how to handle it a lot of the time. And yeah, again, just through different experiences and being out in the world in different environments and industries, I've really got to understand, that embracing failure is, and we have this really bad connotation as well of what failure looks like, but and the word failure, but it's such an important process to go through, to have that self-growth and adapt into your environments and really have an effect on your external world and internal world as well.
I mean, I've heard many people talk about, mistakes being a gift, because actually they help us grow, they help us learn. How far up the sort of pinnacle did you get? What was the highlight of your professional career as a cyclist?
Yeah, I always have this. Oh, it gives me tingles every time I think about it. But I'll sort of take it back. But when I was 14, no, what I was probably about 14 years old. Lizzie Armistead, now known as Lizzie Diamond, she'd won the Olympic road race championships, and I was watching her sort of finish the ride across the finish line, and it was raining, and I kind of looked at that video on YouTube when I was still doing my education studies, and it was like, I really want to be riding with her one day. And I thought, God, I've not really picked up a bike yet, and I don't really know how to ride a bike properly, but one day I'm going to be there. And when in 2016 in Doha, I was at the World Championships alongside her. And I remember being halfway through the race, and I was at the front of the peloton, and Lizzie looked over to me and she gave me a gel, and she said, Annasley, when these two riders were incredible riders, double world champions, Olympic champions, these two riders were like, a big threat within the race. And Lizzie Armistead was a world road race champ at the time, and we wanted to retain her title. Those two girls went, and she was just like, whatever you do, you must stick onto them. And I did that, and I brought them back to the peloton, and Lizzie got fourth. But that was my dream. That was my like Olympic dream, to be in that moment that I'd visualized so long ago. And yeah, I think that I proved to myself that actually I visualized that from a young age, and I got there in such a short time frame, and that was the starting point of going, like, anything that you visualize that you really want, you could achieve.
And obviously that's played a massive part in your journey since then. So let's move on from that moment, and just remind me, sorry, of the condition you said that you had.
EILO, exercise-induced laryngeal obstruction. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I've interviewed a few sports people on the podcast. I mean, a guy called Mark O'Brien, who was a footballer and had heart operations twice, and his career was cut short early. And Leon Lloyd, who came on the podcast and talked about that emptiness of finishing rugby and wondering what's next. And it's also, and he compared it as well to people leaving the army, the armed forces as well, people who've had that structure, or have had those goals, who've had that high performance of that adrenaline, to have that taken away from you at I suppose at a point where you thought the sky was possibly the limit. How did that affect you?
Really affected me. I think I was known as the sporty girl, and was going to achieve lots of things. And when I had to stop that, I really lost who I was. Like, it was my freedom, it was my escape, and it felt like it was my identity. If I wasn't known as the sporty girl who was going to achieve all these things, then what was my purpose? Like I didn't know anything else. I didn't have qualifications to fall back on. And I didn't really have a social life either. So I didn't really have anyone to speak to about it. So I felt really isolated in that time of my life. And yeah, I kind of I can see it from a military perspective because a lot of the guys who I've been brought up by, they went through the same process. So I wasn't really old enough to be able to talk to them at the time. But now that I've got some really cool relationships with guys that have left the military and found it hard to go into the civvy life, it's nice to be able to now talk to them about it too.
So how old were you at this point then when your career was cut short?
So I left at the age of 20, 21, 22. And so I was around about, yeah, about 21. And I then had about 6 months to just be a cleaner and you know, lay my head low for a while. And then I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go run my own chalet out in the French Alps. And I blagged my way into this job. I don't know how I got it. But yeah, I managed to put myself up in the mountains, which again was that was kind of my way of being able to think. And yeah, ran it out of there. But then at the same time, I was exposed from going like to a very disciplined lifestyle. You know, I was on the WADA system, which is the World Anti-Doping System. So every day, you know, you're tracked with what you eat, what you drink, everything you put on your body, everything's tracked and regulated. To go from that lifestyle to then, you know, I'm in the French Alps and I'm exposed to this new life of partying and drugs and alcohol, you know, the kind of normal exploration that a young person would do, but I did it at 160 miles an hour. Because I thought I'd missed out on all these things. And I think it was a moment of time where I kind of lacked that identity and went into this downward spiral. And yeah, kind of hid the true emotions that I didn't want to face.
I was going to say then, was that a search for identity, or was it really escapism? And even the distance you went to go out into the Alps, it feels like escapism rather than, searching for something new. It's just how do I find myself, who I am, and I can imagine how you can get lost in that quite easily.
Totally. Yeah, I really did. And you know, I didn't really know anyone out there. And I came away with a few friends at the end of it, but I also mixed in the wrong crowd a lot of the time. And I lacked self-confidence. I lacked a lot of stuff whilst I was out there. And yeah, but a good friend of mine reached out to me just before my season was up, and he owned a whitewater rafting company, and I'd gone out to see him a few years before that. And I said to myself, one day I'm going to be a whitewater raft guide. And he reached out to me just before I'd finished my season. He said, "Hey, do you want to come and be a whitewater raft guide?" And I was just like, do you know what? This might be the reset that I need, the simplicity of life, and you know, living in a hammock for 6 months. In this beautiful forest with just this tiny little wooden sort of platform to put a tent on. That was my wardrobe, shall we say. And you'd wake up in the mornings and I'd have these two birds always sat just on this tree, and I'd had rattlesnakes underneath me, and um, these two deers that would walk past it around about 4 a.m. in the morning, and the river was my shower. It was my way of washing my clothes, and being able to lead people down some big white water every day, having people's lives in your hands and being able to give them that experience and the communication between the teams and the safety aspect. It went from sort of having a very chaotic lifestyle to a very sort of responsible and freeing lifestyle.
And yet with a bit of adrenaline as well, which it seems like something that you've thrived on throughout. Obviously through the cycling, I can only can imagine, the adrenaline involved in that, and winning races or having the moments like you mentioned earlier. And maybe the adrenaline came in a slightly different form during your chalet days. but then it sounds like the whitewater rafting certainly gave you a balance of both the things you were after.
Yeah, it really started to make me feel a bit more curious about actually all these experiences that I am going through that I think were necessary. I needed to almost go through these, what I would see as quite extreme sort of pendulations of, the highs and the lows, the experiences, the exposures, and all those things that I immersed myself in. I needed to sort of go through all of that and be curious about it to really learn about what I like, what I don't like, the sort of human connections you can make with people, and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a great experience.
I mean, anyone listening to this would go, "Gosh, what a turbulent journey so far. Typically the highs and the lows, and yet we
Yeah.
haven't really got to one of the main parts of your story. And I actually don't know how far off we are from it either. So, from the whitewater rafting, what was the next step?
Yeah, so I knew I knew that my visa was coming up, and I didn't really have too much money to my name, and finances has always sort of scared me. And I tried to sort of put it to the back of my head whilst I was out rafting, because it's not something that you would make money from as such. But I knew that I needed to sort of grow up and actually say, like, Annasley, you need a bit of money to have some independence. So I went from that very freeing lifestyle and not really having too much responsibility in that area to actually going, yeah, I need to get some money now. And so I went into the super yacht industry. I went home, went and did a 3-week course, went straight out to Barcelona and got a job out there working on a 43 meter. And then spent about 4 years working on different super yachts and traveling all over the world on the boats. And again, it's a very turbulent lifestyle. You're living with people 24/7, and there's not really much time to have for yourself, especially when you're on jobs. So like when you've got the boss on, or when you've got a charter on, it's absolutely hectic. And that's where I think a lot of people's, I don't want to say problems or issues, but that's when the sort of when you're not weaknesses either, but when you're suffering with something, it's heightened massively in that kind of environment. And yeah, I saw a lot of that actually within the crews that I'd worked with.
What was
But
your
also,
role? Sorry.
my role, I was a deckhand, so I worked exterior. So I was one female and 10 other guys, and I really thrive off working in a male team. It really pushes me, and I really create that sort of brotherly, sisterly connection with the guys. I like to be challenged, both mentally, physically, and emotionally, and I think I get that with working with the guys for sure.
And I mean, I'd just love to sort of pull it back to sort of communication, because while you're talking about that, working on super yachts, working in even with the whitewater rafting, and from the riding as well, sort of how important was communication, or how has your communication style changed? What did you learn during this journey about the best way to communicate with people?
Yeah, I think sort of coming back to dyslexia, we have to learn how to communicate differently, and pulling people into a sort of conversation emotionally, I think is the key. And you have to have that safe space, that openness to be able to have that communication. And for me to be able to connect with somebody and really have that trust and communication, I have to be able to connect with them on an emotional level. And I think it's about, taking time to understand someone's story and understand, what drives them, I think is absolutely key. So I always took the time to understand somebody's story, understand who's on my team, and what drives them, and what things that they need, and what would work with me. And so yeah, I really took the time with every person that I had within the team to understand it. Because when it comes to things like the safety aspect, which safety is a big part, especially on super yachts, especially in whitewater rafting, anything can go wrong very, very quickly, and you have to be able to adapt and respond to that very quickly. And if you don't have those communication skills, then you're in trouble. So, yeah, I've seen teams where a few really bad things have happened because they don't have that communication style. They don't have the honesty and the trust and the vulnerability and the adaptability to be able to cope with those situations.
So would you say you were still searching for yourself at this point? You're still in that sort of limbo world. I mean, it sounds like you have structure, you have whitewater rafting, you have adrenaline, you have a purpose. You're on a super yacht. It can be, I imagine, very glamorous, but also very hard work. You're mixing with all sorts of different people, but it would appear that you're still sort of searching and trying to find yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I let money overrule me. I was always saving. I wasn't really the kind of person that would like to splash out. I mean, you have people that just, spend silly money on crazy nights out. And I was never really that person. But yeah, finances overruled me, and I just wanted to save and save and save. Just in case a rainy day came or my family needed it. In which, I was faced with a really unfortunate situation in 2022, which at the time sort of came at a time where I was also struggling myself mentally and physically and emotionally. So I had sort of, 4 family disasters that happened that made me come home, and I lost an income from that, and I needed to support my family, and yeah, I really didn't have enough time to figure out that part. But I then went back to the yachts to make more money, and it was just money, money, money. And so in 2023, I was trying to chase the sort of ranking system. So I was going from a deckhand. I really wanted to, become a captain. So you have to go through different stages to get there. And I hit it really, really hard in 2022 to 2023, trying to get those qualifications. And I chased too hard, and my body just completely gave in, and I had to say bye to the super yacht world and put my hands up and say, I don't know what it is that I need, but I need to strip everything away. I'd saved a lot of money, so I knew that I was financially okay for a while. And I really needed to get intentional with my why. What is my purpose? What is it that actually drives me? And what is the thing that I need, rather than trying to look after everyone else?
Most people, I mean, I'm guessing where we're going next. Most people would sort of go into therapy, would speak to people, would be finding those answers by communicating with others, searching, exploring different professions, industries, sports, whatever it might be. What made you think, actually, that's not for me? My journey has to be a solo one.
Yeah, well, it took me a little while to figure that out, actually. I mean, in 2020, I'm just going to take it back a bit. In 2021, I had this idea of maybe wanting to row across the Atlantic. Um, and I just didn't have a good enough why. But then when I had my burnout in 2023, I needed to sort of go through that explorative process, and human performance was always something that drove me, and the psychology behind it. But again, the sort of rowing across the Atlantic wasn't really something that was in my vision, and I didn't really I wasn't ready for that. But yeah, 2023, in May 2023, I had a bit of time, and so I went and did a meditation practice of the Vipassana core. And so it's a 10-day silent meditation where you're sat in a lotus pose for about 12 to 14 hours a day. You start at 4 in the morning and you finish at 9 at night, with various breaks in between. And those sort of 10 days, there's no eye contact, there's no talking. You get 2 meals a day, and you really, really have to sit within that whole space. And you're with around about 130 people in this Dharma school, which is like this big hall. And you just have to really sort of sink into yourself. And it was a great process. It was really tough to sort of go through that process, but it still wasn't sort of giving me those answers. So I went to Marrakesh in September 2023 and did a somatics informed trauma course, and really wanted to understand how to get trauma that's stored in the body out. And I had a lot of experiences throughout my life that I'd pushed down so much. And I really wanted to go through that explorative process through meditation, mindset, and movement practices. And that then started to move things and shift things for me, that I was like, oof, I totally forgot about that experience, or yeah, loads of stuff that came up. And so when I came back from that process at the end of September, start of October, I sat in this room for about 3 months, and I wanted to go start a business in somatics, but I was just like, it still doesn't feel like I'm ready for that. Maybe there was a little bit of imposter thinking in that process. But I thought, how can I collaborate everything that I've done and all the skills and experiences, and really actually tune it into me, and allow me to really understand that, so that I can help others. And so I had around about 10 grand left in my account at this point, and I hadn't really worked for about 10 months, and I was like, oh man, I'm thinking I want to row across the Atlantic, but that's going to take about a year of planning and not having an income. And I knew that I could only do it in a year. Like normally most people take about 2 to 3 years to plan something like that. But I was like, no, I've got energy for a year, and I've only got space financially for a year to do it. So I sat in here for ages thinking why I wanted to do it, and you know, how I was going to do it more than anything, and financially be able to support myself through that. And then this whole journey of rowing across the Atlantic is another story.
So just before we come to that, let's just
Yeah.
I just want to pick up on a couple of things you said. First of all, I mean, you know, you don't need to go into too much detail, but what did that burnout look like for you when you hit that rock bottom, when you pushed? I mean, there's so many people who probably think who push too hard, who are, you know, you're searching, as you said, you're searching for that end goal, but
Yes.
you've pushed so hard that the body says no. And I'm sure with you it was a culmination of a number of things. But what did that burnout look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, my body completely shut down. I couldn't stop sleeping. I was so overly tired. My brain fog was there. And I just couldn't do anything. I was just I was paralyzed in my brain, in my physical ability. I was completely emotionless, like not emotionless, but just completely numb. And I felt really embarrassed, because I was just like, this isn't me. I'm a strong person. I need to keep doing, and I need to keep going, and I need to keep pushing, and I haven't got this goal right now. And it was pure panic. But I just had to release everything and just take some time to do nothing, which felt so wrong in so many ways. But yeah, I mean, I also had glandular fever at that point, which really enhanced those physical and emotional feelings and sort of processes that I went through. So
Well,
yeah.
let's pick up on doing nothing.
Yeah.
I am not the best person at doing nothing. You speak to my wife and she'll tell you that. I'm not very good at mindfulness. I'm not a yoga sort of person. I've recently got into ice baths. I find it's something that forces me into focusing and going, okay, this is going to be 5 minutes of my day where I have to completely tune in on one thing, and that's not freezing to death. And actually, I find even in that, it's the extreme. I am sort of all in or all out with most things that I do. But whenever I've tried that sort of mindfulness. I find that my brain so easily wanders. So I found with the ice bath, it was a way of going, actually, on this, I can focus. What you described of sitting for 12 hours a day in the lotus position, I mean, it sounds, uh, were you already someone who could go into that world? It sounds like such a challenge. It sounds, does it train the brain throughout the process? Because it to me, it sounds incredibly difficult.
It was incredibly difficult. Yeah, I mean, I'm exactly the same as you. My mind goes here, there, and everywhere. But in that process, I mean, with Vipassana, you start off by just focusing on the tiny little sensation just by the upper lip of the nose, and the sort of vortex, shall we say, of left to right nose. And you focus on that for the first 5 days, which is so hard to do in itself. But then you start to go into the whole body, and it's not about forcing anything. It's not about thinking of anything. It's really hard to almost think of nothing, because when you say to someone, think of nothing or try and sit still, it's the opposite of what the body wants to do. And yeah, I really had to sort of take some time to understand, like, why why is it so difficult? For all of us. But one of the questions I always ask myself when I try and go into that state of thinking of nothing is, I always ask myself, I wonder what my next thought will be. And that question allows me to think of nothing. And it might just be sometimes a little flicker of thinking of nothing, or actually it can last for a long time. And it allows me to go into that state of really intrinsically feeling every single sensation. And I think that's the good thing about sports as well. I mean, a lot of people think that meditation is about sitting still, but stillness doesn't have to look like stillness. My meditation was sports. You know, I could really go out and be in the elements, and feel the wind and the rain and the sort of intricacies of when it was really cold, the tingling sensations in the tops of my fingers, and thinking of nothing but everything at the same time. I think sometimes life can look very contradictory, and we don't know how to sort of cope with that. But actually, I think the more we embrace contradictions in our mind and in our bodies, the more we become really curious about what we can sit with and what we can't sit with.
You've mentioned the why a number of times, and it comes up in our conversations on Drop the Act, in many businesses and in individuals searching for their own why, or searching for the purpose of a business and why they're doing a particular thing.
Mm.
I suppose my question to you is, you got in a boat. I'm sure you'll call it the correct terminology. You
Yeah.
you rode from Gran Canaria to Barbados. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why? And what I mean by that is, what was it that made you think that that was what you needed to do to find your why, or that was the next piece of your personal journey to discover exactly who you were and where you were going?
Yeah, I think when I decided to go and row across the Atlantic, I still didn't know my why. And even when I was uh, rowing across the Atlantic, um, I had a drive of wanting to give back, and wanting to raise money for some incredible charities. But I also knew that I wanted to create change in the next generation, and how we can create that mind shift and resiliency. And that was my big why. But at the same time, I don't think you know your full why until you've actually finished the expedition. And for me, I'm still going through that process of really being curious as to why I want to make that change. Um, and now sort of sitting with that, uh, especially after having time to reflect on it, because you don't have any time when you're out in the ocean to really reflect on all the things that you've experienced in your life, and understanding your why and why you want to do it, because it's such an emotional thing to think, like to express, that you can't really vocalize it, because you kind of have to go through the emotions and the sensations and the process to then really vocalize your why. I hope that makes sense.
No, completely. So how do you prepare yourself for something like this? Something,
Mm.
you've never done before. You've done whitewater rafting, you've been on super yachts, but this is completely different. So physically, mentally, and I suppose from a knowledge point of view of what it is that you're going to expect, how do you even begin to start the process of preparation?
Yeah, so when I started the process, I reached out to loads of people. I just social media has some great things and bad things, but the power of social media is that you can reach out to people that have done it before. And I'd followed a few people just through when I was working in Antigua. I used to do what's called the goat trail, and I would sit there at the edge of this cliff. And one day I thought, how am I going to row an ocean? And then a load of ocean rowers came in, and so I started following them on social media. And so I contacted them in 2024, when I started the journey of trying to row, and I just reached out to them and asked them, like, what did they do? How did they start? And the ocean rowing community is an incredible community for wanting to help people to achieve their dreams. So it took me a few months from January to the end of February to really grasp some information and sort of scale it on how feasible it was going to be to make an idea into a dream and actually make it a reality within the timescale that I put on myself, which was 12 months. And I thought, what, with the people that I know and the networks that I have and the drive that I have, I know I can do it in a year. And yeah, around about February time, I started reaching out to sponsors and different companies. And I managed to raise nearly all the money within around about 8 months. And then during that time as well, I managed to get myself an incredible rowing coach called Duncan Roy from the Ocean Rowing Academy. And yeah, he was my lifeline when it came to all the training, and not just the physical aspect, but also he was there for me on a mental level and an emotional level before the journey and during the journey as well. And then, yeah, I had to build the team as well. So, with rowing an ocean, you have to have an operations team. So that's a safety officer, a tracking team, a communications team, a weather router, a PR team, a medical team. So you've really got to understand part of your why, if not all of your why, to sort of bring people into your story too and really believe in your mission. And luckily, people gave me the time to understand my why, and they came on board and really wanted to join that mission and be part of that.
And how close, sorry, this is my naivety here, but obviously you are alone on that boat, but all of those people you mentioned, all of the tracking and everything else, are they in the ocean? Are you on your own completely? Are they tracking you from afar? I don't know, do they come by in a boat and give you a wave, or are you completely on your own for that entire journey?
It's completely on your own, yeah. So I didn't do it as part of an event. I did it as an independent. So as an independent, you have to do everything on your own. So that's the admin, that's the all the sponsorship, that's making sure that you've done everything safety wise, and built the team. So yeah, the team, once I said bye at Gran Canaria, that was it. No seeing anyone for what was 55 days in the end.
And that when you were about to set sail,
Mm.
how what was your mindset? Was it, I could do this, I will do this? Is how do you prepare for that basically? Because you can't set off going, oh, actually, there's a chance I might not do this. There's no point. You've got to be ready to go. How do you prepare that mindset? What tools did you have to implement or learn to be able to focus and go, this is something that I'm going to achieve?
Well, to be honest, I actually didn't really think of the actual row until probably the day before. I thought it was all just a fantasy. I think because you're so focused on trying to get to the start line that that's all you're focused on. You're not focused on trying to actually row an ocean. You go through the process. It's just like going through the processes, but it doesn't feel like you're actually going to do it. And I think there's a little bit of
A bit of denial
denial.
that it's going to
Absolutely. There you
happen.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Um, But I had a great team, a psychologist that helped me just sort of, think about the things that could possibly happen. And I think my biggest fear is death. And I think that stems back to the fact that like my dad would go away on tour and I never really knew when he was going to come back. And so I've always wanted to make sure that people were always going to come back, and that I wasn't going to lose people out of my life. And I think that's, yeah, my biggest thing is losing people and not being able to protect them. And throughout that thought process, throughout my whole life, really, I actually lost myself. And I think this journey was about rediscovering who I'd abandoned so long ago.
And tell me what your parents said when you told them what you were about to do.
Oh God, they didn't like it to start off with, that's for sure. But they're the kind of people that say, if you've got something that you really need to do, then we'll support you in every way, but just crack on and do it. And so that whole year, my boat was in the field and I was working on it every day. And in a way, they didn't want to acknowledge it either, because there is that fear of, what would happen or what could happen whilst I was out there. And so yeah, it was really difficult for the family. I think it'd be difficult for any family. And to be fair, I have a twin sister. I have a brother as well, but a twin sister who I'm really uh, connected to in so many ways. She's my lifeline. And yeah, I think that was the hardest thing, is to say goodbye to her. But we went for a walk down the lane where I live, and one evening just before I was about to leave for Gran Canaria, we went down and it was a really starry night, and she said, "Annasley, what's your biggest fear?" And I said, it's not a case of what's going to happen out there. It's a case of who I'm going to say goodbye to, i.e. myself, this person that I know now, and who I'm going to rediscover. And I don't know who that's going to be, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but it makes me nervous that I might not ever find it. And I think that whole process, I needed to go through that process of extremes to really figure out, who I was.
So, I mean, we've been talking for a while already because it's fascinating, and I know we could probably do another hour just on this, but I'd love you just to take me through a few stories from that journey. Let's before we get to the mental and physical effect on you. What let's go delve straight in with the scariest
Yeah.
moment of that trip.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, the morning of the race, I'd actually given myself motion sickness, because I'd overdosed on seasickness pills, and I had these patches that I thought were a bit of a placebo, but I was pretty wrong in that. So I woke up.
Good start.
Fine. I know. I couldn't really see anything. I was being sick, and it was just an absolute mess. And yeah, I'd started my period about 10 minutes before, and I was just like, oh my God, like this is the worst way of leaving an island. And I had loads of people sort of watching me leave. But I really had to sort of go, honestly, like, you have to go, and no matter what, there's no turning back. So I left, I went out of the marina, and my coach had got a sailing boat, and the community that I sort of gathered over those 2 weeks that I was in Gran Canaria came out to support me, and they were just the most beautiful people. And then, yeah, a mile in, I said goodbye to them, and my weather router had sent my weather report onto the wrong phone, well, on a phone that I wasn't using. And so in my mind, I was meant to be going straight to this waypoint, and I wasn't to sort of turn off in any way. And it was a morning, well, it was a day that was really quite strong with the wind and the sort of sea states. And so after about a mile into it, I said goodbye to them. And then there was this little ocean, not an ocean rainbow, it was a little tiny wooden boat, and with this guy, and he said, "Oh, you've left it too late. You should have gone hours ago. It's going to be terrible." And I was like, God, that's not a thing to say to me. But okay, thank you very much. And so say goodbye to him, and was in the I was in the lee of the island at the time, and then around about 5 or 6 miles, I looked over to my left shoulder and I could see these white caps in the distance. I was like, oh God, like this is not okay. I hadn't seen big water like that. You know, you can do coastal rowing and stuff and train for it, but you really only ever, 80% ready. There's always 20% that you're gonna learn out on the ocean. And I saw these white caps in the distance, and I was like, oof, the angle that I was going at, and the sort of sea state and the wave angle was not in my favor. And with my boat, and with any ocean rowing boat, you have a centerboard to try and keep you on a course, as well as your autopilot, which steers your rudder. It's got no sort of like power as such. It just allows the rudder to go from left to right. And everything was on max when I was sort of really deep into the wind at that point. It's probably about 10 miles in. And around about 6 p.m. in the evening, I saw one wave on my left side. And then I was like, wow, this one's going to capsize me. And so it wasn't the one that I saw, but it was the one behind. And so I had to let go of everything and just hold on. And it flipped me violently into the water, and it was freezing cold. But when I flipped over, it was so still and quiet and so calming in that sort of moment that I was under the water. And then I opened up my eyes and I could see the grayness of my decking, and I realized that I was in my worst feared moment, which was to be in the water upside down, and I didn't know whether my boat was going to come back up or rewrite itself. So I pulled on my lifeline. I got to the top of the surface of the water, and I was reminded of this absolute chaos and the battlefield that I was in. And my mind and my body just went into don't think, just do, drive. And I had to let go of everything, allow the boat to rewrite itself. Got back on board. Alarms were going off everywhere. Things were everywhere, but luckily I didn't really lose anything. And I had to really sort of go. I just kicked into autopilot, like make sure my batteries were okay, make sure everything was good on deck, make sure I was okay, and then alert my safety team. So I went into my forward cabin. I switched on my emergency button on my tracker. That kicked everyone into gear. They could then communicate with each other whilst I set up my SATCOMs. Rang my safety team, and they said, you've got two options. You either call it now, because you can still see the island, or you carry on. As long as you've got no water ingress and sort of no electrical issues as such that's going to stop you from going all the way, then you've got no excuses. And I said, yeah, there is no way I'm going to be turning back. So had to just sort of get myself back into that mindset and get myself changed. I was freezing cold. I was still being violently seasick at this point. And I just had to refocus, and opening that door after just capsizing was the scariest thing of the whole process, I would say, because you knew that you were going to re-enter and sort of face that threat of capsizing yet again. So I opened the door, and the only way I can describe it is it felt like, when you watch those YouTube videos on the North Atlantic with the big ship and like you can see all these big waves. I looked over again to my left shoulder, and I was just like, I said to myself, this cannot be happening right now. This is crazy. What am I doing? But I got my para anchor out, which is like a big sea anchor that sort of stops you from moving too much. Set that up and chucked it out. Set myself back up for a bit of a sleep for a few hours, just to sort of recuperate and try and get some hydration and food in me. And then around about 2 o'clock in the morning, I pulled it in, rode so hard because there was still huge waves, and it's just pure panic really, and sort of like adrenaline. And then passed out on deck, and for the next 3 days I just really don't remember a single thing. It was just pure autopilot emptiness in my brain.
Wow. Um, I mean, how many hours? Sorry, how many hours was this into your journey? When this
This was about 10 hours into my 55 days of rowing.
10 hours in, and I suppose I was going to ask you what's the mindset that makes you go, I'm going to keep going, but I suppose that's the mindset you've had all your life. You've got the goal, you've got the target, and you're heading to it, and there's nothing that's going to stop you from doing that.
Yeah, and also I think more so it was the team. I think it was the fact that I had such an incredible team and they showed me that we had that trust and honesty and vulnerability and communication. And they allowed me to go, they've got my back. And whatever happens out here now, I know that we can face anything. And I think that was the biggest learning point of it all, is that when you've got a tribe around you, you are capable of doing anything, having that support network.
It's a good philosophy for business as well, I think. Go much further when you've got a team around you. Just for people who don't know, I should have asked this earlier. How big is this boat?
So this boat is a 6 meter ocean rowing boat. It's called True Blue, and it's got a lot of history. Unfortunately, last year it was recovered from the Atlantic around about it was around about 700 miles out. When a lovely guy called Michael Holt unfortunately passed away on it. So he was brought back to Cape Verde. Boat was recovered from Cape Verde back to the UK. It was in a pretty big mess. But, we worked hard to revamp it, get all the things that I needed to be done to it. I worked again really hard on it myself as well. And I really wanted to finish that journey that Michael had started. And yeah, he was very much there with me all the way. And I think the most beautiful part of it all was I had this bird that followed me from day one all the way to day end, like the last day. And there was only 2 days that I didn't see this bird, but I'd always see it in the morning and the evening, and you could time it almost perfectly, and you could almost feel it before you would see it. And I'd always say, "Good morning, Michael," or "Good evening, Michael." And it was just those special moments like that that made the journey. And there were so many moments like that.
I mean, you might not be able to go into detail with this, but Michael, that's obviously a tragic story. Was it? Are you able to say? Was it him attempting the journey? Did he sadly lose his life because of the journey, the elements involved, or I suppose the point I'm getting at, for you to be then taking on this challenge, knowing what risks there are. I mean, for many people, it made them go, actually, this is too much. But for you, it drove you on.
Yeah, I mean, Michael had diabetes, and he had a complication out there. But I think with any sort of expedition like this, there's always that risk of death and of not surviving. But no, that didn't put me off, having a boat that, somebody had passed away, and it actually spurred me on to go, there's a responsibility here, and I really wanted to take that responsibility on and really have that journey with somebody, and that was with Michael. And I am in contact with his family, and they were also an amazing part of that process, and I think they got hopefully some peace from it too.
It's remarkable. You mentioned when you capsized that notion of being underwater and actually I imagine sort of searching for the surface or for air or whatever it might be, and yet there being a calmness in there. I find that sort of fascinating, that we do hear stories sometimes about drowning, that actually that it's a more of a peaceful way than people imagine. I mean, thank goodness that didn't happen to you, but it's interesting you found that sort of calm in such a chaotic moment.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I can describe it, and I feel like the ocean knew I needed to start my journey like this, and it was the biggest moment and the turning point of my whole journey. And the only way I can describe it is a little bit like when I fell into the water, it was like being back in the womb. and I had to curl up in a sort of fetus anyway, in a fetus pose, only because things were going to hit me on my head whilst I fell into the water. And the only way I could protect my head was to sort of curl up in this ball. But as you go through that process of being in the water and it's calm and it feels really safe, and there's just nothing apart from feeling that sort of safety net. It was like being in the womb, and the sort of my safety line was like the umbilical cord. It was my lifeline. And so then when I pulled on my lifeline and I rose to the surface of the water, it's like a baby taking its first breath. And I felt like this was almost the rejuvenation or the rebirth of who Annasley was going to be or wanted to be.
Give me one more wonderful experience on your journey.
Oh my goodness, it's so hard to pick. But I suppose another one that sort of sticks in my mind was there was this storm that had a tropical storm that had come from the south and was creating these southerly or northerly winds. So coming from the south and pushing up north, and I was already a little bit too far north, and I needed to come down, but I just couldn't fight the elements. So I had to put myself on power anchor for 5 days, and and I found some friends in the ocean, so these mahi mahi, and they would scrape their bodies on the bottom of my hull, and because my hull has anti-foul, it actually attracts the barnacles, and the amount of times I had to jump in the water and scrape them off, it was just so annoying because it slows the boat down. Anyway, I knew that by me being on power anchor for 5 days, it was just going to be an absolute nightmare with trying to get these barnacles off. But as I was about to put myself off power anchor the day before, I put my GoPro in the water, and the hull was immaculate. And it was because these mahi mahi were smacking the bottom of my boat and eating them. And it really felt like, this anchor I was about 400 miles off land by this point, by the way, and it felt like everything was stopping me from trying to get to land and finally finish this mission. But then it just felt like the mahi mahi were the start of this process of going, Annasley, you've learnt so much out here, and now we're going to give you a helping hand. And having the mahi mahi wipe the bottom of my boat and sort of do that for me was amazing. And then being able to pull up the anchor and ride those next 400 miles with such speed. I mean, the weather was with me, the wind was with me, everything was with me, and for those 4 days I laughed so hard, and I can remember the joys and just celebrating and dancing and the sunsets and the sunrises, and I was so excited to get to land. And then when I reached the north point of the island, I was told by my weather router, Annesley, you've got a really, really strong north current just on the west part of Barbados, so you need to really kind of keep in as much as you can, but you've also got a coral reef that you need to kind of keep out but also keep in. And as I touched my last waypoint, which is a point in the water that you need to hit, I could see this huge squall in the distance, and this squall is like a big amount of water and wind that sort of hit you quite quickly and violently, and I hit that, and this storm hit me just on that pinnacle point, and I thought, oh, this is going to ruin me. I'm going to have to get towed in, which would then mean my ocean row was not unassisted, and I was so scared because it brings so much wind, and the wind was going easterly, and I was trying to cut down the west side, so it was just trying to push me more and more into this northerly current. But in fact, this rainbow landed on me and the support vessel that was going to come and guide me in found me from this rainbow that landed on me, and it squashed everything. So the big waves and everything that was meant to happen just got squashed, and it just felt like everything was on my side, and it made that last part of the last couple of miles so special. And then hearing my sister's voice. And
well, I was going to say, talk me through those final moments when you know you've completed this.
Oh my goodness me. I still get teary about it now. knowing that I survived it was one of the biggest ones. Also, knowing that I was now going to be going into this space of a liminal space, not like now knowing who I was, but also still not knowing who I was going to be, and touching land and seeing people, and also having to face reality, all the things that I'd put off for so long because I wanted to achieve this dream, and this dream was now about to finish. So many emotions, so many thought processes through that, but.
And what have you learned? What did you learn about yourself in that process? I mean, we talk about communication, but you've got no one to communicate with apart from yourself, and obviously the times that you were on the satellite to your team. I mean, what sort of learning is there in that?
I think the biggest thing was to really understand about being in the process, really being in the moment, and the communication that you have with yourself, the self-talk, the visualization, and also the honesty. You can't run away from it out there at all. You don't have time to run away from any of it. You can't escape it. You just have to be brutally honest with yourself, and face your fears. I mean, curiosity, I would say, curiosity will always conquer fear, even more than bravery. And there was a lot of fears that I faced out there that I wanted to be curious about, and I overcame them. And I would say that was my biggest learning curve, is how do you face fear? And it's through curiosity.
It's a remarkable thing that you've done, and I was talking to Lucy about this and just saying, God, I just can't imagine it. Even though there's probably parts of it I'd think, God, that would be amazing. I just can't imagine that I could ever do it. And yet I know that one of your mantras, certainly moving forward, and one thing you want to talk about a lot is limitless possibility, or limitless potential.
Mm-hmm.
And that notion that there are no limits, and that's obviously something you are living your life by. And was that also part of your journey or your learning through your Atlantic journey, or is this a philosophy that you've had all through your life?
I think my mindset has limited me in many ways. Trying to reach that end goal all the time, that's so limiting. But the process of reaching something that not many people do, and being in extreme environments, you get to learn that actually being in the process, and visualizing what you want to achieve and making those things happen, it allows you to go that anything is possible. No matter what you dream of, whether it seems completely ridiculous, which I would say the more ridiculous it sounds, the more it's going to happen. And the more you kind of chase it to go, I need to know that this is going to happen. It's like an itch that you need to scratch, and you can't sit still until it's done. I think that's the best part of it all, is knowing that you've achieved something that not many people get to achieve.
And how has it affected you now moving forward? What's next for you? How do you compete with that? Are you happy to go, I've done that, and now I'm going to move into a slightly more calmer, sedate life? Or does it just make you go, what's the next challenge?
I mean, definitely. Once you start something like this, it's always about, well, what can we do next? But also I think it's a little bit about, for me especially, is really taking this time to say, actually, I have done something that I'm really, really, for the first time, I'm really, really proud of. And I want to take some time to still land my feet. I mean, it's been about 2 months since I've arrived back on land. And I'm still trying to understand what I've done. It's a little bit like when you lock the door in the morning and you go to work, and then you kind of go, did I lock the door? I just need to go back and check it.
Yeah.
I'm still in that space at the moment. And I know that it's because it was such a beautiful yet terrifying experience that I've still not allowed it to sort of land in my body and in my mind. And so I'm writing a huge amount at the moment, just brain dumping and remembering certain moments and talking about it with family and friends to actually go, yeah, it really did happen. And also, yeah, planning a few ideas of what we can do next. And I think my next journey needs to kind of represent where my life has taken me. And it's gone, from the mountains down to the river and then to the ocean. And I think that's where I'd like my next adventure to be. But in the meantime, yeah, I am still trying to work on how I tell my story and how I use my voice instead of using it through action. How do I actually use it through communication? And that's where Lucy has come in to it on a massive scale for me, is being able to understand how to storytell and how to use my voice.
And what messages would you like to get out there? I mean, if you could give some little pearls of wisdom to whether it's individuals who are like you at when you were younger and were looking for their purpose or looking for their future and what that might entail, or whether it's business leaders who are looking to succeed, what are the sort of nuggets of information that you now hope that you can pass on?
I think for me, it's about world experience. For you to really understand what you want to do or what drives you, you just need to be immersed in all the experiences, but also have time to feel those experiences. Give yourself space and give yourself time. We live in such a fast-paced world now, and we want things instantly. But instead, when you have those experiences, really sit in those and really reflect on those and have time. And when you're in those times of experiences, enjoy the process. And some of those processes might not be enjoyable because it might be a negative thing, but how do we use the things that didn't go right in a way of self-growth? So I think it's a little bit about, it's a lot about taking time and taking space and slowing things down and really being very intentional and having that integrity, knowing your why and being really, really curious about it and being vulnerable along the way, because being vulnerable allows you to connect with people.
If anybody would like to get in touch with you to find out a little bit more, where can people find you?
Yeah, so they can contact me via Instagram. So it's Annasley Park _1. And I'm just about to set up a new website, but at the minute I've got my Ocean Survivor. So Ocean and then survivoar.com. And they can message me on that.
Fantastic. It's been absolutely thrilling talking to you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been such a special journey to do my first podcast with you, Chris.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.